because of this. There we go. The hell? Do I have to do that for this too? Let's see. Properties. Yeah. That was weird. Well, let's just go to a random YouTube page just to make sure. I don't know. Sure, we'll do extra credits.
The only light is the glow of the monitor.
Okay, good. It works. All right. Gears Tactics category? What? Hold on. Where's the info? Here we go. Dude, I deleted it. It's so weird. That window is like... You can't select none there. It like won't let me remove it from the thing. Did that do it? Let's see. No. I can't remove it. I need to like just make it like... I'm just gonna write game design in here. Does that work? It still thinks it's Gears Tactics. That's bizarre. I think maybe I have to go to the Twitch website. Twitch.tv/ edit. Not Gears Tactics. Creative. Okay, you have to actually pick a thing. You can't have no category. That's my mistake. Okay, there we go. Now we're good. It should be anyway. Let me know if it's still being silly. But I think now it should be good. Yeah, it's good now. Cool. Okay. So thank you for your technical help there. Emergent complexity. Excellent. I think I want to move this like up just a little bit. A smooge, maybe. Yeah, it's a little better. Okay, so on the upcoming podcast, I talked about emergent complexity from a more theoretical standpoint. Today, let's talk about emergent complexity that we find or do not find in existing games, and talk about how we could add emergent complexity to games, to existing games, or game types. Put this in like italics because it's like the overview. If you ever want to give me a heads up when you go in live, I'm always happy to help. Oh, well, thank you. Yeah. Hopefully I should. I now I remember. I'm like learning these things, and then once I learn them, whoa, what the hell is going on here? Why is this bonkers and strange? 1 second here. Now I won't make that mistake again, I think. Yeah, it really does seem more complicated and like weird and specific than it maybe should be. Okay. So really quickly defining emergent complexity. Emergent complexity is strategic or game state complexity that happens, or that I guess instantiates, or that manifests as a result of the rules. So we can just say like inherent complexity is the rules to the game, including componential complexity, such as characters, factions, special abilities, etc. So componential complexity is like a subcategory of inherent complexity. But inherent complexity is all the rules to the game. So like, you could maybe call it like the code, or the full manual or something. Like a manual that actually laid out all of the details of like, how does this game work? What are the rules? What are all the abilities? What are all the, like a really in-depth manual that has all the stats and how everything works. Like a manual that you could give off to a programmer, and then they would just be like, okay, I can make this game now based on what you've given me. So that's inherent complexity. And then emergent complexity, which is what we're talking about today, is strategic or game state complexity that manifests as a result of the rules. Sometimes part of how do I phrase this? This is some part of the MDA frameworks. Yeah, dynamics. I was just about to say that. Works dynamics aspect here, but not all. I think there's some things that are dynamics which are not this. So this is like looking at it in a little bit of a different way than the MDA framework looks at things. The big question is what games. Let's just list some games. Some strategy games. Let's just try to strategy or tactics games, and then talk about what their if they have emergent complexity or not. Did my bot go off, by the way? It's not been going off. What the hell? Hold on. Twitch. Keith Bergun, Clockwork Gamedev Show. Do it, man. It's so weird. It just doesn't post anymore. I'm just going to post in Discord real quick. Okay, cool. So, where did this go? Boop, there we go. Bad bot. Yeah, I don't know what the bot's deal was. He was always late. He would always post it like 5 minutes after I went live for some reason. But, oh, thanks for hosting me, Pete Potato. So, yeah, for people who are just joining us, we're talking about emergent complexity in games. Yeah, I'm going to give people like 1 minute before I keep going to show up since the bot didn't post. How's everybody doing today? Yeah, so I already recorded a podcast that'll be coming out on Thursday about emergent complexity. So I've already like done a bunch of like thinking on the sort of more theoretical side, but this is a good opportunity for us to just go through some examples of games. So I'm just gonna list a few games that I know. This is my best day in a long time. I finally got some really solid sleep. That's so funny. I actually got some good sleep last night too. And I'd been under sleeping for a long time. And also, but you know what sucks is like, I usually don't remember my dreams, but I remembered my dream for last night. It was like a nightmare. It was one of those like gonna fall into a hole kind of nightmares. Hate those. And just like, yeah, I would just rather not remember any of my dreams. That would probably be my choice. Okay, so XCOM 2012, Advance Wars. We talked about some of these. We talk about some of these on the podcast. These are Magic. Let's actually talk about Hearthstone, because I've played more of that than I have Hearthstone. Had an awesome dream last night. Nice. Let's talk about some board games too. Puerto Rico. Or let's do Race for the Galaxy instead. Abstract. So like chess. We should definitely talk about that. That might be enough. In fact, let's put chess up near the top because it's like such a, it's chess, right? Like, and everyone thinks of chess as like, that's what you want. Like, man, if I could design the next chess, that would be just the best, right? So yeah. What else should we talk about? It might be interesting to talk about, well, once we get into each individual game, we can talk about some variants. Maybe we don't need to talk about both these. These can both be like as their own unit. What else? Yeah. I mean, so like I should start off by saying like I generally feel like strategy games have very little, and this is something I'm actually just realizing recently. is that there's strategy games are very bad at emergent complexity. Generally speaking, like I can't think of a lot of strategy games that have good amount of emergent complexity. They are all very like sort of like management-y and like almost and puzzle-like or contest-like. So actually, real quick, I should also write why do we care about emergent complexity? And so here's what I kind of talked about a little bit on the podcast, which is in order, so like the spirit, not the spirit, the sort of core value that how do I word this? Strategy games are best when let's just do it like that for now, when there is enough room for like creative play, right? Creative decision making, creative strategies, playfulness, etc. Right? Like that's something we've been talking about recently with the whole concept of playfulness, and what's it called? Like, how do I word this? I don't want to just say our best. Well, if you think about like ambiguous decisions, a fundamental property of the strategy game is the ambiguous decision. When so like basically like these creative moves, these sort of let's actually just back up a little bit. It's really hard to resist solution by inherent complexity alone. See, like just by adding more and more cards and stuff like that, no matter how many things you sort of add, it always has this like, it's like a low yield, right? Adding stuff to the game is a low yield method of operation. I guess if you add content forever, it can never be solved, right? I mean, you could just have this, but the thing is, every time you add something, you're actually creating a new system. So like, yeah, it's kind of actually has more of like a puzzle-like dynamic, right? Where like puzzle games, as long as you keep giving me new puzzles, right, then I can keep going and playing the new puzzle each time. And that's kind of what this is doing. If you're keeping adding to a system, it's kind of becoming a new system every time you add stuff to it. So players are constantly kind of learning new games and mastering these new games. Like here's a sort of a side point. When you're constantly changing and adding to a game, players are basically, routinely solving or close to solving your game and then just getting a new one. Like a puzzle, like a weekly puzzle type of thing. And that really is kind of what it is, because the meta, in that sense, is kind of like the solution to this week's patch or whatever. I don't know where I should put this exactly, but maybe we'll just put it like in double parentheses for now. Emergence basically allows for effectively infinite depth. Well, it doesn't have to be effectively infinite, but let's go to here. Yeah, emergent complexity is more of a multiplicative function. that can, increase the systemic depth, complexity by, a huge factor, by 10x or 50x or something, right? So sometimes adding one rule, if it has a lot of emergent complexity capacity, it can actually change it interacts with all of the inherent complexity that you had and like balloons into this exponential, even exponential ish. I'll write because there's math people probably watching who there's all words have multiple meanings. There's exponential in the like literal sense, and then there's or the mathematical sense, and then there's exponential in the conversational sense, and or the colloquial sense, I guess. I mean exponential in the colloquial sense, which is not that different from the mathematical sense. It still means like a compounding effect. Large. It's not large, though. Nah, I'm not going to leave math words alone. Nah. Math words, like all other words, are up for grabs. It's not just that it's large. It's like the basic concept. Maybe you can give me a better math term for something that's like, 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 times 2. I know that is an exponent, right? Like that is what that is. So I'm not actually being wrong. But I just wanted to right? That's correct. That is an exponential function, isn't it? So that is what I mean, is that something that has that, growing, I don't know what another term for it. Is there another term for that besides exponential? Because that's I guess maybe even just saying I don't know, whatever. You get the point. Accelerating, maybe, sure. I don't think that has the right connotation, but yeah. Yeah, we're going to appropriate math terms in this show. Sorry about that. It's just what's going to happen. What's up, Brick Road? Good to see you. Hi, Ryan, Hair Machine, Crouch Mode. So we're talking about emergent complexity. And we're just doing a little bit of theoretical stuff, and then we're going to jump into what are some games. Because my overall sort of thesis, my starting point thesis is that strategy games are generally pretty awful at emergent complexity, and that doesn't have to be the case. Yeah. Triangular numbers accelerate but are not exponential. What is a triangular number? I don't know about that. Okay. So the last point I'd make here is it's hard to... it's always hard to... It's making a sufficiently complex and deep game without use of emergent complexity is, I kind of want to say it's impossible. Is impossible. Emergence is when the swamp thing arrives. Oh. Yeah, that's true. Or when Rambo comes up, right, with the machine gun out of the river, and he's like, oh. Is there such a thing that as depth that is not emergent complexity? I would see depth as a result of emergent complexity, but yeah, you can have some depth. If you have a game, for example, well, actually, that's actually a good question. I think Marcus, the Crouch Mode's point is pretty legit. That so I want to get into Advance Wars and XCOM. Yeah, it comes from. That's how I would phrase it. Yeah, but actually, it's funny. These have very little. The only sources of emergent complexity is the grid. right? Because the grid itself and the positionality of certain things, like, slightly changes, like the grid and movement on the grid has some emergent properties. That's it. But like, yeah, it's hard to like, yeah, I think that the relationship between emergent complexity and depth is maybe more closely linked than I sort of thought. No way you can have depth with just inherent complexity. Yeah, like that's the thing. Like, yeah, literally just inherent complexity. Like, and that I should be clear that no game only has inherent complexity, right? My point is not that they have none, but my point is more like they have the bare minimum. You know, like I think that chess and XCOM and Hearthstone, maybe not Race for the Galaxy, we can talk about that separately, but like these games, like to me they just seem to have the bare minimum, like just enough so that they can kind of function. Just got here. Did we define depth today? No, but I think I'm not being super prescriptive about it. But maybe we should do that anyway, just to depth is strategically is roughly the number of strategically viable states, something like that, in a system. I think, does that like sort of roughly get it? I think we all kind of know what we're talking about with depth. Then again, we have people trying to say that we do have different disagreements about what specific games are deep, but okay. So chess, so what does it have? The grid, right? Because the grid, actually, let's do it this way. Like the grid, it also has pieces with specific movement patterns that sort of interlock with each other. What else? What else in terms of emergent complexity does chess have? I suppose you could say like the pawn becoming a different piece, maybe. I don't know. Maybe not. That's borderline. And that's the other thing too, is that like these are not like, you know, there's sometimes going to be gray area sort of things where it's like, oh, is this a bit of emergent complexity or is this inherent complexity? I think there's going to be some examples where that's a little bit difficult. Let's see. I think depth is much more like how much there is to learn / no. Well, no, because if that's depth, by that definition of depth, then you only need inherent complexity, right? Because you can just add like 1 billion cards. And it's like, that's a lot to know. But actually, I guess maybe you're still right, Brick Road, that depth is still how much there is to learn / no, because even if they did add 1 billion cards or something like that, like a game that had 1 million cards but also had a shitload of emergent complexity would have way more stuff to know. So I guess like that's a fine way to put it, probably. Right? And yeah, okay, cool. I would call that complexity, and depth would be how much you can do with it. Could trying to guess your opponent's next moves be a part of it? A part of what? I think that if you boil down something like trying to guess the opponent's moves, you're really still just looking at the system, right? Because you're trying to look at and estimate based on your valuation of certain things. So like in chess, you're trying to guess the opponent's next moves is really you looking at their state and sort of like playing in your mind and being like, okay, if I was them, what would I do? And that's all based on your understanding of the system and the valuations and stuff. So it's really not, like this Yomi kind of thing. What else we got? Is inherent complexity just a pointedly complicated way to say rules? Yes, but the problem is people don't think of componential complexity as part of the rules often enough. In my experience, when I say the rules to a game, people are not thinking, I will do this for you though. Because, like Garen's abilities in League of Legends, or the character Garen. People don't think that is like a rule for League of Legends. Unfortunately, they should, but they don't. So that's why being deep doesn't mean good. I agree. Deep is sufficient but necessary for good. Necessary but not sufficient. That's what I meant to say. Chess gets emergence by the recursion of your best move. Wait, the recursion of your best move, assuming your opponent makes their best response, assuming you make your best response. I'm hesitant about that because let's talk about a game that we think is not deep, like checkers or Connect 4. Even let's do Connect 4. Okay? Connect 4 has the thing that you're talking about, Volt Aerial, right? So I'm not sure I'd call that emergence. Chess also gets emergence because taking a piece recursively affects the ability of your other... okay. Yeah, capturing, we could say, maybe. Because capturing... So what emerges when you capture? I suppose capturing has some. I'd like to make a note that Shogi does more with this. Because in Shogi, when you capture a piece, you take it, and then you can redeploy it as your own piece later on. I don't Marcus, that's kind of my sense too, the crouch mode. I kind of don't... This is a question mark one. I don't think this really makes anything emerge from capturing. In fact, it's almost the opposite. It almost actually closes off possibilities, tightens things. Threatened squares. Yeah, well, we talked about threatened squares. I'll add that to this. Threatened. It's the same thing as the movement patterns, right? Knight forking feels pretty emergent. Yeah, that's all covered in this, right? Isn't that? Emergent things in chess, things like forks, right? That is an emergent, like something like forks. You're talking about something that's a dynamic that happens as a result of like the emergent complexity, or it's a strategy, I should say. Forking is a tactic that players can use because the system has, because of this, right? This is what causes that to be a possibility. What I mean is that the value of capturing a piece is non-linear. It's not like scoring points. It recursively affects the rest of play. Yeah, that's what, so I'll put it as a question mark, like, because it's kind of, I suppose. I mean, I think anything you do recursively affects the rest of play, almost in any game, right? So, yeah, I don't think that makes that emergent complexity, because by that standard, literally everything you do in a game is emergent complexity, because it all recursively affects the rest of play. So, yeah. Like Connect 4, we can all agree Connect 4 has very, 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 very little emergent complexity, right? Like it has like it has like the bare minimum, like one thing of, you're building these lines of trying to connect things. So you drop a piece and it creates this, everyone knows what Connect 4 is, right? They might have different names in different countries, but just to... I think it's a good example. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Right. So, yeah, the grid's actually bigger than I remembered. But the idea is that you drop a piece in the top here. And actually the dropping dynamic is itself a little bit emergent-ish. Because like, you know, as someone puts something, when you put a piece in a specific position, can I just have a picture for the fuck's sake? Google Images is like the worst at this shit. Okay. Open image in a new tab. There we go. Yeah, so as you drop a piece, like if I were to drop a piece here, now it means that the other player can now access this spot. The pieces stack, right? So that's something. And then pieces become inaccessible as you drop pieces on top of them, right? So there is like some basic emergent complexity there, but it's like really just the bare minimum. Yet, this is a good example for why we can't use Volt Ariel's idea, because obviously everything you do in Connect 4 recursively affects the rest of play. Gravity emergence, that's like about it. The diagonal connects. Yeah, it has the connection things, which is a little bit like the chess interlocking forky kind of stuff. Like in fact, the way if you're going to try to win in Connect 4 or in tic-tac-toe, the way you do it is by creating some kind of fork, right? Where the player is like, oh, I can only block them on one of these two sides. And yeah, chess is kind of just a more complicated version of that. So I don't know if there's more that we want to say about chess before we move on to the next game. I don't agree, really. Like, getting a collectible object in a platformer that just scores points doesn't recursively affect the rest of the game. Not in any linear way, at least. There is a difference between the two things that you listed, but neither of them is emergent complexity, as I'm trying to talk about it here. But I'm not saying that those two things you listed are the same things. I'm not saying every possible rule in the scope of all interactive systems design recursively affects the system. I'm saying that in strategy games, though, mostly at least almost entirely that's true. I was just thinking about how if tic-tac-toe had any kind of emergent complexity, it wouldn't be a solved game. There's always an ideal and a wrong move, right? Yeah, so that's what I kind of wanted to do today is like, let's take Connect 4. How would we add, I mean, there's a million ways you could do it, but like what are some ways you could add emergent complexity to Connect 4? It's going to involve adding some rules, right? But like, what are some systemic rules that could be added that could change things? I mean, Connect 4 is so simple that we're just designing a game from scratch almost. So I don't know if this is an unreasonable proposition. Volt Ariel, I guess I'm not sure what you mean then. Like, determining the value of capturing is only interesting because of that property. Yes. Have the chips bounce sometimes? Yeah, that's a good idea. Like, bounce rules. Like, if there's one piece below me, I bounce to the left. If there's two, I bounce to the right. If there's something like that, you know, or maybe even better than that, I bounce X spaces to my right. X is equal to the number of pieces below me. Or you could, something like that, you know, like, that's probably not good, but that's an example of a more complex rule that like has a dynamic quality to it where it like changes, based on the situation. Well, also, Volt Ariel, I did put a question mark on here. I didn't say it's like not, because I think there's a little bit something there to the pieces being removed. But like you could agree that shogi has more emergent complexity as a result of the capturing rule, because in shogi you can then redeploy those units anywhere else on the board. Color changing flipping. Yeah. Color changing flipping is good. Also, like adding a resource. You can connect 3 and and then they disappear to gain a, gold token, which, blah, 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 right? Like, does a thing. Yeah, we can just write that. If you have a tile on right and left of something, the middle one flips. Yeah, and so like we here in the chat, we like all understand this because like this is like what we do when we design games is we think about like these kinds of things. And yet it's shocking that like when we look at games like Advance Wars and XCOM, which I would think in terms of computer gaming, they're kind of up there in terms of like what people would think of for strategy games. Like we could talk about Civilization might be interesting to talk about, or other 4X games, and whether those have emergent complexity. What are some other you guys list some games for me that would be interesting to talk about, and they could be digital or physical. If I don't know the game, unfortunately, it'll kind of be less of a thing. So even Master of Magic, which there's a lot I appreciate about Master of Magic, but I'm not sure I would say it has a ton of emergent complexity. Like I actually think it has so many rules, and so few of those rules really add to the emergent complexity. Agricola would be a good one to talk about, because a lot of people know Agricola, and I think Agricola also like kind of sucks on emergent complexity. Like it has more than most video games. In fact, I think this list is currently ranked like low to high. You know what I mean? Like this is the lowest emergent complexity. So far, I think Agricola has more emergent complexity than anything below it. StarCraft, mutaglaves make plus attack better. True. That's something. What is complex in Agricola? There's not a lot that's complex in it. I guess, Agricola, and that's the problem with tabletop games, is that tabletop games have the issue of not wanting to be too big and too complicated because you have so much table space. You don't want the onboarding process to be a total fucking nightmare. You don't want it to be too fiddly, like that there's a lot of management fiddling shit that you have to do. So tabletop, despite the fact that I think the best designers in the world are working in tabletop right now, tabletop as a medium is kind of constrained, and you see that in some of the designs, I think. Because so increasing your family size feeds back into the abilities. Yeah, that's definitely. There are also sometimes the role selection stuff in Agricola. I mean, role selection to me, that's what I wanted to talk about with like Race for the Galaxy. Role selection. I think that role selection is a good way because what it does is one of the ways you can create emergence is by role selection. Bundles several actions together. That's so in Race for the Galaxy or Puerto Rico or any role selection game, you have like some role, like the producer role or whatever, right? And as you're building new buildings and stuff, they get triggered by that producer role. So the producer role starts meaning different things later on in the game. That's why emergent complexity is great. You don't have to make it fiddly or have a bunch of rules to create complexity. I think you do. I think you kind of do. But maybe you can give me some specific examples of games that are not fiddly and that don't have a bunch of rules to create complexity, but just rely on emergent. So what I think happens here is that we have a lot of games that are like chess. And chess, let me just describe chess. An incredibly simple game from an inherent complexity point of view. 8x8. How many types of units are there? 5 unit types or something? Let's see. Pawn, rook, knight, king, queen, bishop. Is that it? I think that's it. 6 freaking unit types. And yet, because it has some emergent complexity, it's playable. Wow. Yeah, exactly. Yes, chess and Go basically totally rely on the small amount of emergent complexity that they have, which makes their like very simple rule set work. And it's like a miracle. Like Tetris, for example, is another one that I was thinking about. Like, oh my God, Tetris works? Holy shit! But you only have this little well and like these 5 or 6 different tetrominos, and you can actually play that. Like what? So there's a dancing bear effect. Where it's like, damn, for a thing that like I can just flip open and just place some pieces down and just play, holy crap, this works really well for something that simple. You know what I mean? I think that's how that's working a bit. Whereas like, so imagine if you had a lot more to work with, like, if you had, a thing that was much more inherently complex, and then you also used emergent complexity. Like that's kind of what I'm wanting to see. And so I think maybe what we see in the modern era of strategy game design, highly complex games inherently that make almost no use of emergent complexity, and highly or like super simple games, super inherently simple games that also make almost no use of emergent complexity, right? Just enough to work. So let's see. Gotta catch up. Tigris and Euphrates, Through the Desert, good example. Yeah. Well, Through the Desert to me is very much like a Go, but I think Through the Desert is yeah. Tigris and Euphrates. Tigris and Euphrates feels to me more like a little bit more of like a modern design that has more rules and more sort of structure going on. I really love a lot about Tigris and Euphrates. I think that's a really good. I wish that could be built upon more. I feel like he got really far with Tigris and Euphrates, and then at some point, I mean, the tile drawing thing is really what kind of kills me with that game. Particularly, it comes out with the red tiles, I remember. That was my big sad moment. Hey, No More Birds, how's it going? Okay, let's see what else. I'm underselling chess a bit, lol. Of course, I'm always underselling chess. It's kind of my brand. It might fail on other metrics, but in terms of emergent complexity, it's a high scorer. I guess a high score compared to what? Compared to the other games, yeah, I think probably chess does have more emergent complexity than like XCOM, because XCOM and Advance Wars have like almost none. Like it's shocking how little these games have. So yeah, chess has more than that, I guess. What else? Welcome, Voltaire. That's what we do. Yes, that's true. No More Birds. I feel like no person feels the dancing bear effect with chess. That would only be a game designer thing, I think, and only a couple of designers. Haha. I don't know. I can't speak to what people feel, really. There's definitely something quite spooky almost about just how much emergent complexity does come out of chess. Yeah, I agree. And I think that's a big draw of those kinds of games. Like, there's still a lot of, like, romance, more so even with Go, about, like, oh my God, we're just, like, sitting around this little table. It's like this elemental force of nature that is Go, right? And, like, we're all going to sit around this piece of wood and, like, place these stones. And it's like, there's something romantic about it. And it becomes this complicated, weird shape. Frank Lance talks about how, like, when you look at a Go board, you're seeing thought visualized. Yeah. What else? Most people view chess as like super complex, intelligent brain burner game. I don't think anyone's like, wow, this is playable only 6 units on a 8x8. Yeah, that's true. No one has that thought. That's true. Through Through the Desert that was me saying that. Through the Desert is what if you removed all the fun from Go, and a lot of the misery though, right? But I agree that ultimately with Through the Desert you might be kind of left with like nothing left over a little bit, because it gets rid of like weird shit, like having to count your points in Go is kind of a nightmare, and it's just a lot more playable than Go. You know, if you tried to play a Go with a new person right now, they'd kind of be like, what the fuck are you, what is this? Whereas Through the Desert's like pretty easy to like jump into on the first try. And certainly by the second try, you're officially playing. Whereas like, I sort of feel like even if you played Go for like a few months, like you're kind of just doing random shit. I should play T&E more. Yeah. Just embrace the output randomness. I mean, if I could do that, then, you know, we wouldn't need any of this stuff. Embrace the dark side. No, never. There's a follow-up to T&E with a slightly more control of tile drawing. Oh yeah, I actually I want to try that. What was it called again? The new Tiger Street Radius. It's actually on mobile, and it has hexes, which is a good sign. You were meant to destroy the output randomness, not join it. I think the main issue with Go and chess is that it relies on the history of study in order to bridge the gap between when you start and when it gets interesting. Yeah. Yellow and Yangtze. Yeah, I want to try that out. So, yeah. Uh-oh. It's not as good? Oh. That's a shame. Well, there's a lot to like about T&E for sure. Actually, that might be a good example to throw in here too. But yeah, Agricola. What are some emergent complexity things in Agricola? Gaining new workers, maybe. So, I don't know if that's. I don't even know if that is. I mean, barely. What else? There's some role selection-ish behavior in that, like, some of the cards, you know, like the improvement cards or whatever, improvement cards, etc., will sort of like trigger when you blankety blank, I guess. But it's shocking. Like Agricola, you would think would have more emergent complexity than it does. And this is exactly what I want, like, this show to be today, is like us all to have these revelations that I've been having about, like, oh my God, yeah, these games are not like do anything with emergent complexity. I feel like there's near zero emergent complexity in Agricola. I think you're probably right about that. And that's true of like so many of these kinds of games too. And that's not to say that there's nothing to like about them, but it is, you know, from a game design perspective, like, man, we really there's a lot that's not being done with all that. Civ 4X games. Is there anything else we could say about Agricola? I'm trying to think, like, you know, if we're gonna give this the capturing to chess, then we should also give like other players taking resources from the board. Oh, you know what else could be? The farmland, you know, creating... Actually, yeah, the most emergent complexity thing probably in Agricola is, like, fences, probably. Right? Like, creating those, like, little shapes. And it's, like, that's not very much, but that's, like, the most that it gets, kind of, like... Yeah. Let's see. Kinesia games have it. Root has it too, and PAX Premier. Been liking those recently. I haven't played Root yet. I gotta play. We gotta play together, right? Aren't we gonna do that? Let's do that soon. I have a hard time understanding emergence as soon as we step away from physics, like spatial pushing stuff around. So a grid. Let's do that. Let's go into that a little bit. And then I talk about this a lot on the podcast. But how to emergence. The easiest way, the simplest way. A grid typically will do it, but not just a grid, but also specific shapes. And if you think about what those shapes are doing, they're grouping. Like a lot of emergence, like the fundamental thing is like grouping. Actions, resources, etc. So like another way to do it that isn't about a grid. So if you had like some Euro like management-y kind of thing, you could do it via role selection. Actually does it. Role selection. We didn't talk about that yet, but role selection is a good way in Puerto Rico or RFTG. Now a single action can change several things it does at once. And so how to complexity, then how to emergence. So wait, hold on one second. Catch up here. Agricola. I guess that's feast for Odin. Well, Agricola does have a grid, but they don't do anything with it. I think emergence on some fundamental level basically comes from recursion / loops. I don't know about that. A grid, but also specific shapes. Again, grouping, right? So like the bishop's attack pattern, an AoE spell, etc. Right? Like those kinds of things where they have these shapes. And again, with those shapes, what you're doing is you're grouping things, right? You're grouping a bunch of tiles together as the affected area of effect. I think that this is the fundamental thing about emergence, is grouping. And let me actually open up my show notes because I had another note that I wanted to talk about. Right. Here's another thing. And I call it this in the podcast. Non-accumulative resources. This is copy-pasted right from my podcast notes. So you're getting a free preview here. Non-accumulative resources. Resources in a game that go up and down, and the state of them. And how do I phrase this? How did I put it in the show? Let's see. I shouldn't, and which there's a positive. Yeah. Like this. Resources that can go up and down throughout the match, in which there's a positive and negative trait to having more or less. Right? So, accumulative resources would be health, score, victory points, etc. Always better to have more. No advantage to having less, except in like some weird specific character who gains more, health steal when below 30% HP or something, right? But there's no systemic advantage to having less, right? But we want non-accumulative resources in games. My favorite example is, and I can't go one game design chat without talking about the Puzzle Strike gem pile, which, as you have more, you're closer to losing. But you also and you are gaining more cards, and you have more gems to attack with. Right? That's one of my favorite examples. But also positionality on a grid, going back to a grid, because No More Birds made the point that I think about grids and movement and stuff, and that's super true. But here's why. Because positionality on a grid is a non-accumulative resource, is almost always a non-accumulative resource. As I move my unit closer to the enemy, I am threatening the enemy more, and I am threatening myself more, right? So you can move your unit, let me just make a little drawing for this. New, boop, boop, boop. So, you know, if, actually, how do I do it? Let's do like a happy face. So if I'm here, you know, this is me. I should be blue, and they're red, right? Okay. Oops. Right, so if I move up to here, especially if you have like, you know, you can see it even more if there's like more bad guys behind everybody, right? So select those. Let's make this like that. There we go. So if I move my guy, so here's like, yeah, boop, boop, and boop. Let's say that. So as I move my guy closer and further away, I just want to make this clear. There's just 3 different possibilities. Possibility 1, transparent. Yeah. Possibility 2. Possibility 3. Okay, see, this is 3 different possibilities. This one's possibility 1. In possibility 1, I'm far away from the opponent, so I am safe, and also I am not threatening the opponent. That's crappy. Possibility 3 is I have moved really close to the opponent, and so I've gained more of the resource of attacking, you know, of threatening the opponent, but I've lost the resource of being safe from the opponent. And then this one's kind of in the middle, and you can of course have all kinds of things in between. You could be like here, you could be here. So this is a resource. Your closeness to the enemies is a resource. And so that's one reason why grids get the association. Let's back up and see what everyone's saying in the chat. Think you're onto something actually, Volt Ariel. The go-to example of emergent complexity is life, and it's all about the iterative butterfly effect stuff. Also the combination of positive and negative feedback loops. I have a lot of writing to do today. I'm going to get started, but I'll be back if I can. All right, see you soon, Pete Potater. Role selection and other grouping. Some like the opposite of emergent complexity. It's like inherent. The complexity is stated by the rules rather than coming from interactions. Seem like the opposite of emergent complexity. Interesting. Well, but the thing is that they happen dynamically in play. So how close my guy is to the enemy is not stated by the rules, right? How many gems I have in my pile at any given moment is not stated by the rules. What is specifically grouped together with my, my producer role is not stated by the rules. There are other things. There are other components that inform that, of course. Everything is ultimately informed by inherent complexity. But yeah, does this make sense to people? Do people understand what I mean about like, and so, this also leads to the bigger point about my critique about like, related to so far I've got 1, grouping, 2, interactive / butterfly effect, 3, non-accumulative / two-edged swords. Yeah, double-edged swords is a good way of putting it. 4, incomparables. Yeah, those all seem distinct to me. So the iterative / butterfly effect thing, is there a game that doesn't have that? Is there a strategy game that doesn't have iterative / butterfly effect stuff? I am not aware of such a game. Volt Ariel earlier used the example of like getting a coin in Mario, but I'm looking for examples within strategy games. I don't think there are. I think that all strategy games, we have that figured out. That's not the problem that needs game design theory for. We already have recursive, iterative stuff. Like that's baked into the cake. How does emergent complexity interact with the info horizon? If I can see all the roles I can select from, how is that emergent? I will copy paste your question and answer it, but I want to make sure that we don't lose what we're talking about here. We will answer that. Let's see. All games are basically recursive. Yeah, that's already baked in. Still a source of emergent complexity. There's a recursive function for any game. And only works if you don't have big state resets. I think your theory about not resetting state helps with butterfly effect stuff. Yeah, I think so. In Race for the Galaxy, at least, what triggers from what role is directly determined by the rules rather than some positional game state type interaction. No, that's not true. I'll run you through it. In Race for the Galaxy, if I pick our FTG example, actually, let's put it up here. Let's put it up with the actual Race for the Galaxy. Example, I pick producer. This causes, well, hold on. So on my board, a bunch of things happen when I produce. That is based on which planets, etc. I have built already. It could produce, 2 or 3 goods. Any honestly 0 to 6. 0 to 6 goods, sometimes, who knows how many. It could give me cards in hand. The rules written. Yeah, I mean, ultimately everything comes back to rules. Emergent complexity is not complexity which violates rules. You know what I mean? You don't violate the rules. Ultimately, it's all going to come back to the rules. But the thing is, which rules get triggered is a result of which things you've already done. You've already built these planets and whatever. And so, for example, what does producer mean? Well, it depends. A producer might mean you just fucking wasted your turn. You did nothing, right? If you have no planets that can produce, you might just have literally done nothing, or worse, given your opponent production, possibly, of goods. But producer could also mean all kinds of different things. It could mean you just produce one good that you really, really needed, or it could produce, a bunch of shit or a bunch of cards, right? Sometimes producer can do different things. It's not the most emergent complexity thing in the world, but it is emergent complexity in that from this one role has all kinds of different contextual meanings based on what else is happening in the system. And some games wipe the state too much and then you don't get iterative complexity. Absolutely. Yeah, that's true. That's why, something like Brickroad, what you just said, fighting games, to me, I don't like to consider them strategy games because they wipe the state too frequently. Yeah. Those things happen because the rules written on your planet's technologies, we already read that. The interactions are basically only interesting if they recurse, though. That's what makes them hard to evaluate because they're non-linear. Voltariel, I have a question for you. What is a strategy game that doesn't have recursion, or has very low amount of recursion? I guess maybe that's sort of what Brickroad is talking about. Maybe something like a fighting game, or StarCraft, or I don't know, Quake Deathmatch or something, where people can just sort of reset the state all the time. Yeah, but yeah, okay, that's fair. For what it's worth, to me, recursion, that whole sort of stuff, the fact that you have some state that's going to actually stay, that's before this conversation. Let's get, that should be a given. And then what do we do from there? So, and if you think about it, a lot of these games that we're talking about, they all have, none of these games lack that, right? All the games we're talking about, they all have recursion. We're not talking about Street Fighter, right? So, StarCraft is a lot of sticky state bases permanently mine out its stuff. I think that's part of this, KB. That's a good thing to keep in mind when designing to max emergent complexity. Yeah, it's a good thing to keep in mind. But like I said, in these I brought up these not as because they all have this recursive thing. They all have that. That's not what I'm trying to talk about today. But yeah, of course, it's something to keep in mind. And like, yeah. Let's see. It's not just about the crouch mode. It's not just about having it, but that state has to affect future state in a manner that actually produces emergent complexity. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So like a counter example for Race for the Galaxy. So, in RFTG, in a RFTG variant, it could be the case that the only things you can build are just VP buildings that just give you a flat number of VP and don't do anything different, and don't respond to the roles. Right? So like, and actually like Dominion is kind of like this. Dominion is more of like a game where you are more just kind of, it's more direct and there's less, it doesn't have role selection. Yeah, maybe Dominion's a bad example. Actually, I'm trying to think of another game that does have role selection. But like, because role selection doesn't necessarily, like, you could have a role selection thing that doesn't group anything. And actually, Agricola kind of is like that, right? Because Agricola, there's not very much of that grouping. Agricola is just you pick one of the spaces and you do the thing that it says, and things don't really change that very much. Do you know what I mean? The roles sort of stay the same throughout. Let me answer Ryan's question. Where did it go? Oh, it's here. If I can see all the roles, I guess some of the characters do grouping, but it's minor. I agree. Well, I'm not even saying Agricola stinks, Like, I'm just saying that it, like, I don't hate Agricola. I have a lot of major problems with it. But I think it's just, it's a good example here of lacking emergent complexity. For grouping again, sure. Did I ever give one? Grouping actions, resources together. So two or more actions in the game trigger at the same time because of the same trigger. That's like the most simple way to put it. So actually, you could say that, I guess a grouping in chess, and maybe this is sort of the capturing rule, very minor grouping, because you're tying together moving my unit and destroying another unit. This wouldn't necessarily have to be the case, right? Like, it could be that the bishop just shoots in a diagonal line and then just removes anything that's in a diagonal line. Didn't have to be that the bishop moved to that tile. But because it is, that is like a grouping now. It's like, if I want to move to that tile, I also have to capture that unit. You see what I'm saying? Does emergent complexity in games lead to knowledge/strategies that could be understood on the emergent level without understanding the fundamental rules of the game? This seems like a hard question. Does emergent complexity in games lead to knowledge/strategies that could be understood on the emergent level without understanding the fundamental rules of the game? Like in science, the laws of physics lead to life, but it is possible to have knowledge about how life was created without knowing fundamental physics. I'm not totally sure I get your question, but based on your example, I'm tempted to answer yes. Yeah, let's see. That sounds like, in fact, I think if your example is explaining your question properly, I think it's always the case, because you never have a full understanding of the fundamental rules of or not of the rules, but like of the full strategy space of a game. You're always kind of making these like coarse guesses, or ambiguous decisions or whatever. Crusader Kings or Civilization on PC. Actions that create other state in addition to the direct action you want to take. Some game where players aren't really expected to know all the rules, just dynamics. I find that irritating personally, though. Oh, when they literally don't know all the rules? I mean, that's something we talk about on this show a lot because we play games where they intentionally hide rules from the player. And part of the skill of the game is just literally learning all of the rules. I think that's... I don't know, it's sort of like dodging the whole... It's a different problem, let's put it that way. It's like a different animal than the sort of proper strategy game, I think. We could talk about that more, but I think that's the fundamental thing about emergence in science. You could say that someone playing a video game is always doing that because they can't see the code. Right. Well, not because they can't see the code, but because even if they could see the code, if I could see the code to some complex strategy game, that doesn't mean that I know all, like, if I could see the code to League of Legends, that doesn't mean I know when to go for a dragon or not. You know what I mean? Like, the strategic space of the game, I'm not saying League of Legends is the best example, but like, take any game you want, pretty much. That's why video games are bad. And thus why life is bad. The crouch mode. Okay, I was going to answer this question. Did I do it? Where did it go? Here it is. Let's color this like a different color. How does emergent complexity interact with info horizon? If I can see all the roles, I can select from how is that emergent? I guess I would just ask, like, how is that not emergent? Are you okay, like, let me clarify. By emergent, I don't mean emerging out of the info horizon. This concept has nothing to do with the info horizon, basically. Now, of course, like, dynamically speaking, when games being played, something, a piece of game state comes into play, comes into view, then the player can interact with it and make it as part of their strategy. So, like, it matters. But conceptually, this is not related to info horizon. I'm having a hard time with definitions. I'm getting there. So let's just go back. Emergent complexity is strategic or game state complexity that manifests as a result of the rules. Now, some of this might be fog of war is one of the rules, right? Or the info horizon, whatever it is part of the rules. And so it could be that there is some emergent complexity as a result of that. In fact, usually there is, because in order to gain more vision, right, to move the info horizon up, you have to move a unit, right? Those are grouped together. And so that is sort of like an emergent complexity thing, lightly. I'm assuming strategy game is always the implicit topic in this chats. Yes. More chats that I missed. Life is fine because it's not a strategy game, it's a toy. Just play video games that aren't strategy games. That's what I do. Having a hard time with the definitions. I'm assuming the strategy game is the implicit topic. Yeah. So here's the thing. I feel like, let's talk about these games, because now this is, we're not going to go on too much longer, another 15 minutes or so. But this is the problem that I'm looking at right now, because like one of the main things I want to do is I want to make a squad tactics war game like XCOM or Advance Wars, but I want to make it have emergent complexity, where I see in these games I find that they have almost none. They just have the basic grid, the emergent complexity that comes with having a grid, pretty much, and that's it. They don't they don't do much more with it. I wrote some other notes in my show notes that I could bring into here. Let's see. Yeah, so we talked about, whoops, my bad. A tactics game. Yeah, here's some stuff I wrote down for a tactics game. Copy paste it. Here we go. Boom. Special abilities that have shapes to them or lasting effects, like terrain changes. Right? So units can... Even just, again, like going back to the chess thing, like of a unit having a special pattern for their attack, that alone makes things more complex relationships will emerge, right? Because of those shapes. Lasting effects, actually lasting, and this kind of gets a little bit maybe to what, who was talking about that before? Volt Ariel was talking about state transience. Not too much state transience for any lack of actor removal. Shouldn't, like, you could even say avoid actor removal. So in the context, like aesthetically and, in terms of genre conventions and stuff, it's pretty hard to completely get rid of actor removal, but the more that your interactions are like one-shotting people, the less opportunity you have for emergent complexity. Now, that's the thing I would say is that, like, this is not adding emergent complexity. This is more providing terrain onto which emergent complexity can happen. It's more like laying the groundwork so that we can have emergent complexity. If you just are like blowing everyone up at one-shotting everybody, there's no opportunity to build state and to build that emergent complexity. Tactical Breach Wizard. This is the second time I heard about this. Can we look at this up? Because I've been meaning to do that. Oh, it looks like Invisible Ink. Small scale, turn-based tactics game where you play does it have randomly generated maps? Because my first thought is puzzle. Like my brain just went like puzzle. Like just lasered in on puzzle. But let's see. Because you know why? Because the grids are very small and because I feel like they're not randomly generated. But let's see. Can we like watch? Oh, there's gameplay. Let's watch their gameplay.
Just to give a flavour of what the game is like now, because it's changed a fair bit since we last showed it. So I'm playing as Navy Seer here. This is my only unit for this mission. He is a Special Forces operative who can see a short distance into the future. And he's in this police station because he was tracking a rival team of Special Forces wizards who have just hit this police station to break a prisoner out of jail for reasons.
Oh wow, this video is long.
And Navy
I just realized.
Just after them, he is taken to be.
That's really cool, though. One thing I just want to say is, like, I've been thinking about this myself. Like, wouldn't it be cool if, like, the main video you find on Steam is not some stupid hype commercial, but, like, was, like, a 10-minute explanation from the developer of, like, hey, here's what this cool about this game. I was just thinking that the other day. Like, that's maybe what I should do. Yeah, that's cool. So, yeah, this looks like maybe the next step for, like, an Invisible Ink kind of thing. I like that. It's going to be maybe hard for me. I have to just watch this whole video, I think, and I will respond to it later. Or have it alongside hype video. Yeah, you probably need to have the hype video, I guess. Tactical puzzle. Okay, yeah. Tom Francis. It's funny. I think I have a memory of Tom Francis from like 10 years ago, and Tom Francis had like some critical, some review or something of something, and I went on there and I was like doing an internet comment, and it was like, some like basically less sophisticated version of what I'm saying now about video games, and then all his fans were like hating on me and yelling at me, and Tom Francis stuck up for me. Actually, I remember that. He was like, hey, this guy is just like trying to like make games be better or something, and so I was like, All right, Tom Francis. Like, no one ever stands up for me when I'm hating on video games. So I remember that about him. And Heat Signature, we should play sometime. I will play that because he was nice to me. Quite cool, and he makes video games about design. Oh, well, we should watch some of his design videos sometime also. Let's put that on the thing. Tom Francis design videos? What? Good design ideas, great podcast. Okay, well, there you go. Cool. I should maybe have him on my podcast sometime. Yeah, I'll look into that. Okay, so yeah, not too much state removal. Positional abilities, we already that's kind of the same as positional. Terrain or other objects you can place which have behaviors. That's another one that's big. So if I can place something and it's just going to do something passively over time, that's going to cause emergent complexity to happen in one of these kind of games. Like imagine if in, Advance Wars, you could place something and then every turn it would like move one tile in that direction or something and then eventually do something. Or, these are not easy to think about, but I'm going to use some from Gem Wizard's Tactics because that's what I've been working on that for a while, but fire that sort of spreads, randomly, that kind of thing. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. We can get him on for an interview. I should research more of his stuff, but, and non-tally resources, which we talked about already. Resources, it's good to have a lot and it's good to have a few of. Enemies could get some kind of smoky flavor. Buffs. Yeah. Buffs, debuffs that mean a certain thing. Honestly, you guys, I'm sure, can think of other things. This is the process of game design. Right here, this is where we're thinking about the interesting and hard questions about game design. And I feel like so many strategy games, just don't even start that process. And that, I don't know, that's my feeling about it. So yeah. 4X games. Let's do this real quick. How can we add emergent to... a lot of that's going to be similar. Some similar things as in tactical war games, for sure. A lot of the same things would apply to 4X games. Just delete the genre. Actually my answer might be... don't delete the genre, but... kind of just focus on making this a better and better toy. So the toy nature of Civ, it's funny because it starts out and you're like, oh man, I have this weird place to explore and I can build this thing and oh maybe I'll try building this thing and then oh there's some barbarians over here and blah 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 and you're doing stuff and then at a certain point. Civ 150 turns in or whatever is just so not a toy anymore. It's just this it becomes just a data entry job. It's a menial low skill labor job that you're just clicking yes, basically stamping a bunch of forms over and over again. Gets worse and worse every turn. Yeah, exactly. And the freaking designers have admitted that. And year after year, they try different things, to try to fix the later game in Civ. But it's dude, the one thing you're not trying is maybe the match length for Civ shouldn't be 6 to 8 fucking hours long. How about that? That no one's tried that yet. That never occurred to anyone. It's not that that didn't occur to anyone, but it's it's unfortunately that's been considered part of it's a genre convention, and it's also part of the fantasy is that it's this epic long thing, and it's oh god, it's so stupid. Somebody really has to. I think unfortunately Civ in particular, because it's such an institution in games, they are gonna just have to just stop making them or just keep. Basically just keep making small changes around the edges. I think that some of the latest Civ games, 5 and 6, Both had some really smart design moves in them, but I think they're not allowed to like question some of these fundamental qualities about Civ. What is my thoughts about games that lie about probabilities? I think if they lie about probabilities, yeah, I think Marcus, the crouch mode, probably nailed it with that answer. It's probably not good. I wouldn't do that myself. Like they say 70% chance, but it's actually 90. I would just reframe it and just be like, I wouldn't put numbers. If you're going to do something like that, if you don't want people to know the real percent, there's a better way to do it. Just have it be like you chose a thumbs up or a thumbs down or something like that. Abstract it out more. So if it's above 50%, you have a thumbs up. And also I would just like, if you're going to be like fiddling with shit, if you're going to be like fiddling with stuff like that, just make it that, players should always know all the rules. Yeah. Like a magic 8-ball, have fun with it. Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's the other thing is with the off topic, the reason it's kind of off topic is that like for a toy, kind of anything goes, whatever works is fine. So it doesn't bother me that happens in Civ really. So I don't have a strong feeling about that, but I do have a very strong feeling about Civ lasting fucking 7, 8, 9 hours long to play. A single match. I wonder what my stats are. Yeah, I think that one of the Civ devs said no one finishes matches of Civilization. And it's like, are you just accepting that that's how that is? Like, because I was thinking of myself, like I played so much Civ, so many hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours of all the Civ games since the beginning. And how many of those matches did I complete? Like, I don't know, 10% of them or something, because like it really just falls apart so bad. That's a different topic than this. But yeah. What length are you going for with Gem Wizards? For a match. So Gem Wizards kind of has like more of like almost like an XCOM-y or like Advance Wars-y or Fire Emblem-y kind of like campaign structure. One match of Gem Wizards, which is sort of the proper strategy game design unit of Gem Wizards, I think would take 15 minutes, maybe 20 minutes. I think actually we started timing it a little bit, and that might change, but it's, for me, I sort of feel like strategy games should last somewhere between 10 minutes and 45 minutes, maybe an hour, somewhere in there. And Gem Wizards Tactics is towards the shorter end of that. And then, you have a campaign structure, which is this very, 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 very light metagame, where basically you just pick missions, and there's like a resource that's like a land resource that you're trying to win more missions than you lose. It's really kind of like a tournament. That's a good way of looking at it. It's like you enter into a 10-match tournament. And you can play those over time. But a single match, like if you're going to do a custom game, for example, 15 to 25 minutes. Now, it's a turn-based game, so like the time can be varying a little bit if players are taking a lot longer to make their turns, but like nowhere near an hour. And nowhere near like 9 hours or anything like that. Nothing ridiculous. And it's funny because like that's not even some of the fantasy. Let me show you some of these Fantasy General 1 maps. Let's see if I can find. This is a good example. Fantasy General maps. No, it's not gonna have maps. Well, these are kind of maps. But I don't know if these are... Yeah, not really. So it's funny because, some of the maps... unfortunately, fast number 2 is showing up. I don't know how to find these. But anyway, the point is, Fantasy General 1... starts out with these like pretty small maps that are not that big, and then they just balloon into these massive hours and hours long, like just this is another one that's just like the scope just gets completely out of control. Damn it, I can't find it. Oh well. Anyways, the point is the maps get crazy huge at a certain point. Yeah, like once you start getting, even the third continent, it starts getting really gross. But then by the fourth continent, it's like, forget about it. Let's see if I can look up one of these. Like Crystalwood Vale. No, I clicked maps. That's funny. No, it's not going to show me. Darn it. Oh, well. No Connect 4. All right. What else we got going on? Multiple matches in one campaign. Yeah, like I said, like think of it as like a tournament, basically. It's like a tournament structure. You're going to win and lose, like 10 matches. If you're aiming for the single match to be the length of the tactics match, is there anything that increases your unit's abilities during the match? Yes, there are things that do that. There are capturable caves, which give all your units like a buff. They're kind of like an objective or something. There are also, of course, like, special abilities and buffs and things like that. So then in a way, the campaign is the match because there are some long arcs stretching over the whole campaign. Sort of. You have the same kit of units, and units will level up at the end of every mission. 2 of your random units will level up that survived. So there's like very, very light. And if you want to say that the whole campaign is one game, I guess, sure. But the meta game is like basically nothing. You literally have, between each mission, you have exactly one out of 3 things you can pick. You'll have mission 1, mission 2, mission 3, and you can pick one of those. That's the only thing you can do in between missions. There's no like buying units, selling units, upgrading units, equipping units, blah, 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 buying buildings. There's nothing like that. So it's so light that the match is super the focus, as Brickroad is saying, yes. The match is the game. And if you click like custom game, or if I had multiplayer in this, we would play a single match. Like that, the actual tactical game is, in my mind, very clearly what Gem Wizard's Tactics is. Will ELO system change difficulty between matches or campaigns? Yes. Both. That I know that was not a yes or no question, but the answer is yes to both, actually. So match to match, there's going to be a few different difficulty dynamics happening at once, but it should, in general, get linearly more hard match to match a little bit because your units are kind of leveling up more and you're actually getting more units too. Number 1. Number 2, if you win a match, the next match should actually bump up a little bit more so that you're more likely to lose the next match. And yes, here's a fundamental weird thing that I'm doing in this game. This is a strategy game, a single player strategy game that you can lose, and you will lose half of the time. That it'll be designed because then on top of that, there's the single player ELO, right? So like you're currently like a silver 3 player, and the game is overall tuned for you to have a 50% chance to win the whole campaign at your ELO, right? So that you winning the whole campaign is going to result in you losing about half of your missions and sort of choosing to lose the right ones. But yeah, it's not going to be like Fire Emblem or any Advance Wars where you just like keep doing the same mission over and over until you win it. You're going to like, a lot of times you're going to be like, oh shit, this one's not going well. Can I afford to like surrender this one? Should I surrender now before I like lose more units? That kind of stuff. So yeah, the ELO system is going to, I'm sorry. Actually, the answer to your question, Reshiv, is the ELO system will not change between matches. It will only change at the end of a campaign. We could make a version of another ranked mode that only had like single matches, maybe. But I think that there's something about this system that it'll work better in this structure, I think. Air, Land, and Sea is a recent game that does this really cleanly. Nice. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I really like the idea of like losing in a single player game. Like I miss that so much. That's another thing that, like when I was playing Wargroove or whatever, and granted I was playing the early missions, so it doesn't really count, but the later missions are not really any different. I played hours and hours and hours and hours of Fire Emblem. And yeah, there's just always this feeling like I'm going to win. It's just a matter of like, am I going to win later or am I going to win now? Elo system within the campaign could lead to weird strategies where you try to do badly to decrease the... Exactly, yeah. So that's not going to be a thing. There's only Elo system at the end of the campaign. Then it'll tweak the Elo up or down based on, whether you won or lost. And now the good thing about that is that, so in Oro, sometimes we would have these weird situations where, and by the way, the Oro, that was like my first attempt at a single player Elo system. We can do a lot better in a lot of ways. But one of the nice things about this is you've done 10 matches by the time the Elo system is going to adjust itself. So there's a lot informing that, and there's a lot that's going to, like you're going to kind of get like pretty good feedback after 10 matches, I think. The number 10, by the way, doesn't have to be 10. That's sort of just what was my basic starting place idea for a number of matches that felt kind of like, like a war. It could be 8 or it could be 6. Yeah, I kind of like I like there being a little more because I want there to be a little bit of that, like, oh, I got this one unit and he's really good. And like, we could like save things like the unit stats, so this unit has like 10 kills or something. And like and I want you to be able to rename your units and sort of get a little bit of that like XCOM campaign-y kind of feeling from it. But yeah, XCOM is too long. All these things are too fucking long. And yeah, maybe later on we can add like a longer mod for people who want that, but why don't it allow renaming? What's wrong with that? It's a weird thing to have a strong reaction to. Who cares if we have renaming or not? I never want to rename it. So in XCOM, like a third of the fun comes from renaming your units. Yeah, and that's the other thing. Twitch meme potential. Like, naming the characters after people in your community or naming them after some famous people or whatever. But yeah, sure, make the case on Discord. I'm about to wrap up anyway. Yeah, you're right. In like a lot of strategy games, I don't want to rename units. You don't have to rename units. It'll be just like a totally optional feature. I think that it's kind of cool in like a silly way. Yeah, might as well let people rename units because like you will have attachment to these units. You'll be fighting through multiple battles with them and stuff, and there will be weird things that happen where like, oh my god, this unit did some crazy thing, and then you're building all this meaning into this unit, and then like to me, like, even if you don't rename the unit, quote unquote, you still like kind of you have this particular identity for that unit in your mind. And renaming the unit is sometimes just a way of like formalizing that, the thing that's already happening. Anyways, thanks so much for watching. Today has been about emergent complexity. And I'll probably upload this video to YouTube. On Thursday, we'll have a new podcast episode that's about this topic that goes into similar things, not all the same stuff. Yeah, and... what else is going on? We're going to do some Gem Wizards tactics. Yeah, well, let's see what we're doing the rest of the week here. Gears Tactics Part 2. I don't know. After what Bowles was saying, or no, who was saying that? Yeah. Oh, wait, I think I just made a connection in my brain. That, oh, you know what's funny? Like, I know Ryan Bowles, but I just made the connection that that's the Bowles from the Discord. Like that did for some reason, because it didn't start with Ryan. I think that's why that didn't connect for me until just now. Okay. Yeah. So anyway, Bowles was saying on the Discord that some very bad things about Gears. So like, I'm like a little less pumped to play it more. I will make the Google Doc public. And let's share this thing. We'll do it right now so I don't forget. Copy, boop. And then we can throw that in here. And you guys all will have access to this if it's useful or if you want to make comments. Oh, I have to make it that you can comment on it too, because some people commented on the last one. That was kind of cool. Share. Anyone who has the link can comment. Boom. There we go. So yeah, you should be able to do that now. What? So tomorrow I don't know if I want to play Gears. Maybe we should do Hades tomorrow. I've been putting that off and putting it off and putting it off. Yeah, maybe we should do that tomorrow. I'm looking for doubles. There are a few doubles here still. I like this one. Cool. So yeah, tomorrow we'll play some games and yeah, we'll see what's going on. And maybe we'll do some Gem Wizards Tactics at some point. We'll definitely do that on Wednesday. Maybe we'll do that on Thursday too. We'll see what happens. But yeah, thanks for watching. Oh, we already did these two. Oh wait, that was last week. My bad. We'll figure out what we're going to talk about. Yeah, we'll see if something comes up on the Discord. We'll do that for the design discussion. And yeah, counters. What is this? Is this like RPS discussion? We'll put that on the design topics list. Okay, yeah, so we'll figure that out. Anyway, thanks for hanging out and chilling. Brick Road, let's play Root sometime soon. Maybe tomorrow if you're around. And other than that, thanks for coming by and watching the show, and I will see you all on the Discord. Peace.